yeah, great to see everybody. My first time coming to this group, and Pete, you've also been a bit of a legend in the networking scene, and we've been at events. I've sort of seen you across the room. We probably have a gazillion million shared contacts on LinkedIn, but not met you properly until we connected over today. So thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, yes, I do wear many hats, but actually this is quite special today because it's actually the first time I've spoken about my newest hat, which is as the COO of the Oxford University SDG Impact Lab. It's also the longest job title I've ever had, a bit of a mouthful, and I will explain more about the lab in a moment and exactly what we do. Also going to talk obviously a bit more about the SDGs, and most importantly talking about how all of us as small business owners, and I do include myself as a small business owner, how we can use the SDGs as a really useful roadmap for our own businesses. So I do have a few slides put together today, but this is not intended to be a lecture or a lesson. I certainly don't have all the answers as to how we can use the Sustainable Development Goals or anything else for that matter to solve all the world's problems. But hopefully what I can do is share a bit of my insight and experience of working in this space, both in the context of working at the lab, but also as a small business owner and advisor myself. I think we've got a Q&A coming up later, but if there is anything that you want to ask me as we go along, if there's anything I say that is just, to use Emma's word, just a load of bollocks, then please call me out on it and ask me. But to give you a very brief bit of background, I've already spoken to a few of you in the breakout rooms, but just a little bit about how I ended up working at the lab and my journey to get there. So basically everything I've done has been driven by that firm belief in business as a force for good and an enabler of positive change in the world. I hate it when people talk about the big bad business and profit being bad. I think, business can be one of the most powerful agents of change if conducted in the right way. But it took me a little while to kind of get to that point. So I started out as a journalist and a broadcaster. I worked for Sky Business and for the BBC, and then as a reporter for the Sunday Times Fast Track 100. And it was in that role in particular that I had the opportunity to interview loads of super successful entrepreneurs and business owners. These are the people that had set up the fastest growing, biggest private businesses in the UK. And I think that's what gave me the bug, that entrepreneurial bug, to think, do you know what? These people aren't that special. They just have an idea and they do something about it. They execute, they get out there. And so I thought, I could do this too. So I've gone on to run a couple of businesses, small businesses. I had a sustainable stationery business long before anybody really cared much about recycled paper products. And I sold that after 2 or 3 years. And then more recently, my food business, which I've already mentioned, and I won't talk about at length here. But that's the Wonky Food Company, making products from imperfect and surplus. I'm still involved in that as a director. And my passion for working with other businesses and for championing that idea of positive, responsible, ethical leadership also got me involved with working for the Local Enterprise Partnership, who I'm sure many of you have worked with, who know of here in Oxfordshire. So I've worked there as a business advisor, and most recently helped to run a 4-year programme supporting social enterprises, charities and purposeful businesses across the county. I think we supported more than 400 businesses over those 4 years, which spanned COVID. So it was an extraordinary time to be running a programme like that. And I have to say, it's been one of the highlights of my career. It was a real privilege to work on it. But it was through a networking event, actually, a bit like this, that I reconnected with someone who had just set up this quite new initiative at the University of Oxford. called the SDG Lab, and it turned out there was an opportunity to get involved. So it was actually, for me, a bit of a light bulb moment, as I feel like I've always been one of these people who've had lots of different threads to my career, done a lot of different things, and sometimes felt a bit of a fraud because of that. It was like, oh, I just jump from one thing to another, and there's no real sense to what I'm doing. And when the job at the lab came up, it kind of joined the dots for me in many ways. So I took the chance, really, to get involved. Sorry, that was a bit of a longer spiel about my background than I intended, but I think, I certainly find it always interesting when I come to events like this to hear about people's journeys, because there's never a straight path to get from there to there, is there? We always have a bit of a wiggly, squiggly route, and I always think that's really interesting to hear. But onto the SDG Impact Lab. So what do we do? It was the lab was started back in 2021, so it's still very new. I think of it being, it's going through a startup to scale up phase at the moment. And it was started by two Oxford academics who saw an opportunity to bridge that gap between academia and business. So the whole mission behind it is to enable businesses to access some of the best and brightest minds in the country. And that really isn't a boast. Oh my God, these students that I work with are extraordinarily gifted and talented and passionate and committed. And I get imposter syndrome every single day when I hang out with them, but I'm also learning a lot as well. So it enables businesses to draw on that talent, but it also works both ways. It gives students that really important opportunity to have a taste of working in the real world on real world projects and actually finding applications for their research. Some of the partners we've worked with so far include EasyJet Holidays, BMW, and more recently, the charitable arm set up by Formula One champion Nico Rosberg. I'd never heard of him until I started at the lab, but I've now met him a few times. He's actually coming to Oxford on Monday. We've got a big event as we close off this year's project, so that's going to be quite exciting. And all of these partners, they're working on projects that help deliver UN Sustainable Development Goals, hereon called the SDGs. And projects, to give you a bit of a flavour, some of the example projects that we've been doing this year include looking at the use of AI to tackle food waste, subject close to my heart. A project that is looking at marine biodiversity and how we can look at different ways of removing plastic from the oceans. And then closer to home, we've been working with BMW on some really amazing kind of social impact projects, actually. So, for example, looking at improving pathways into STEM careers for local communities living near the BMW Cowley plant. BMW for years have been trying to crack that problem of why they can't employ people locally and why they can't get people into management from Oxfordshire. And there's the communities on their doorstep suffering from real problems and low employment rates. So we had students working in the community, talking to schools, talking to community leaders, looking at what could be done to improve this and how BMW can get involved. And they came up with lots of really fascinating recommendations. So we're still very new. We're evolving our business model. As I said, we're kind of in this scale-up mode ourselves, and we're bound to trip up and make a few mistakes doing that. We've got a lot more work to do around actually measuring and reporting on some of the impact of these projects, but it is a really exciting place to be. So that's a little bit about the lab. So before we go on any further, I'm just going to see whether I can actually see everybody in the room. That's always the tricky thing when you've got the slides and loads of people in the room, but maybe shout out because I'm probably not going to see people waving. Who's heard of the SDGs? Actually, maybe wave hands because otherwise we'll all be. So few of you have heard of them. I think, we hear a lot at a very kind of top level, but maybe the big question is how can we actually engage with them and use them in our own businesses? And again, I'm not going to pretend to be a world expert on the SDGs here. I'm still learning a lot. And if anybody tried to test me on being able to name all 17 with my eyes closed, then I'm not sure I could do that. I am learning a lot more about them, both good and bad. But I'm really passionate in how we can use them in our businesses. So just to tell you a little bit more about them. So they were launched in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly, and they were signed up to by all 193 member states. So back at that time, that was quite an extraordinary achievement just in itself to get everybody on board. And they're basically a collection of 17 interlinked global goals that are designed, as the quote says there up on the screen, designed to be a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. So quite an impressive mission statement there. And those goals, as you can see up on the screen, are various and wide-reaching and hugely ambitious, from eliminating poverty and hunger, encouraging sustainable cities and communities, and promoting justice and strong institutions. They're really intended to be a massive rally cry for where we need to get to as a society. So it's a cry for governments, for business, and also for individuals, for all of us just as individual citizens as well. And it's to encourage us to think big, to be ambitious, and to really play our part to drive change. And no one is promising that this is going to be easy either. So there's actually a deadline of 2030 to be able to actually achieve all of these goals. And each of these goals, there's a UN website that you can go on to do a quick Google. Each of the goals within them have a number of specific targets and indicators as well to help break them down into more actionable steps. But it is widely acknowledged that we are nowhere near achieving those goals by 2030. And this year, 2023, marks the halfway point since the launch of the goals and to the final 2030 deadline. COVID clearly threw a massive spanner in the works. It really slowed down the momentum behind the SDGs. We all got distracted for a few years. But I think there is a renewed energy now and a momentum to try and get us all back on track and push the SDGs back on the global agenda. So last month, for example, it was the SDG Summit was held in New York, just to try and galvanize some of that energy and excitement again behind the goals. So, if you're coming across them for the first time, then, it's a great time to get on board and get involved. So I'm guessing there's nobody in this room who's taken a look at those goals, those statements there, who would argue with any of them, right? They all make complete sense. They all describe a wonderful vision of the world that we surely all share and would love to make a reality. So the why is really not in question. We should all be trying to achieve these goals. What's in question is how. That's the tricky bit in the doing. And I'm going to guess that there's probably a number of you in the room today that might be thinking, well, I'm just a small business. I'm not a BMW. I'm not an EasyJet Holidays. I don't have really deep pockets. I'd love to be able to do, these really big, bold, grand, ambitious projects to achieve the goals, but what can I do? I imagine that some of your businesses, maybe it's just you, maybe there's a few of you, 3 or 4 in the business, and possibly you feel a bit powerless to enact change on the kind of scale that the SDGs are talking about. Or maybe you feel it's not your job. Maybe it's down to governments to actually really lead and drive change and make the world a better place for us all to live in. But I'm hoping that you don't feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way, because business absolutely can be and should be a force for change. And you don't have to have super deep pockets or hundreds of staff or hugely ambitious strategic plans around the SDGs. I think the way I like to look at the SDGs is that they're a great way to focus the mind. They provide this collective mission and vision statement. Excuse me. And we all know every good business should have one of those. I'm trying to see Emma in the room. I have, been lucky enough to sit on Emma Easton's kind of marketing presentations, talking in depth about the importance of having a mission and vision statement. And that's kind of what the SDGs are for the globe, for all of us. And I think when you switch on news, somebody was talking about the doom and gloom on the news at the moment, and everything sounds a bit too overwhelming, and it's very easy to say there's just too much to do, so I'm going to do nothing. What the SDGs can do is give you that map, that roadmap, or the hooks on which you can hang some of your own actions and initiatives. And there are lots of tools out there to help businesses of all shapes and sizes, from one-man bands to multinational corporations. So the UN Global Compact, which is the logo you see up there on the screen, is actually a global network specifically focused on businesses who are committed to taking action on the SDGs. And there's actually a UK arm, a UK network, so it's worth looking them up. Annoyingly, membership of the UK arm is only open to businesses with 10 or more employees, which I don't understand, but it's still a really valuable resource for accessing some useful implementation tools, and also for seeing some examples of other action that businesses have taken. So there's still a lot. If you jump on the website address that I've got there, there's quite a lot that you can still access without having to sign up as a member. And one of the things that they advocate, and apologies for the poor quality, I've just seen, you can tell I was putting these slides together late last night, so that's not terribly good quality. That is they're called the SDG compass, that wiggly bubbly image on the right hand side there. But it's quite a useful step guide for companies on how they can align their activities and strategies, as well as manage their activities. So the compass presents 5 steps for businesses. Number 1, just understanding the SDGs. Number 2, defining your priorities as a business. 3, goal setting, some specific actions and goals that you want to take within your business. Integrating those sustainability goals into the heart of your business, and then crucially measuring and reporting. How do you know you're making a difference? How do you know it's working unless you properly scrutinize what you're doing and measure your impact? Another way to get started, and actually to make the SDGs a bit more tangible, is to look at something called the SDG Action Manager tool. So another good website is that one, the sdghub.com, and that actually provides a web-based platform, talking about software earlier and how it can increase our productivity, and that takes you through various steps to help you create a profile around your own business and provide some real solid action points. I think actually for those of you, I know Pete and Sarah, you're on the B Corp journey, aren't you? And there may well be others in the room who've gone through that. So B Lab is actually behind this Action Manager tool, so it's a really good process to go through. And I think just as a bit of advice on how to use that tool, but just generally for interpreting the SDGs, first of all, just find your starting point. You can't tackle all 17 of these huge goals all at once, and don't try to. So just think about which of those SDGs matter to you the most. I'm sure there will be 1 or 2 that will resonate more than others, so start with that, and it's a step by step. You can't do everything at once, so choose the ones that you're particularly passionate about and can take action on. So for example, we'll look at some examples in a minute, but the number 1 goal, which is no poverty, eliminate poverty. An easy starting point for that is, are you paying all your staff the living wage? There's an Oxford living wage. Have you signed up to that? You can badge on your websites that you are, a signatory to that. It's a really powerful movement that's gathering momentum here in Oxfordshire. So that's a tangible action point that you can take. Secondly, understand your impact. So get a really clear view of how everything in your business, your operations, your supply chain, just how you're set up as a business model. Heard somebody talking about, they've recently set up as a kick, fantastic, business model. Understand how all of these elements can create positive impacts, and also identify the risk areas within your business for each of those SDGs as well. And I think it's important to remember that impact goes beyond just you and your immediate actions and choices as a business. Think about, you are part of a bigger network and, other stakeholders that you interact with. So what about your suppliers, the people that you conduct business with? You can be an influencer, you can be a thought leader, you can be that, you can pave the way for change by bringing people together in a room like we are today, and being able to share our actions and our wins and our achievements. Talk about, the non-financial ones, the other things that we've done in our businesses to really move things forward and make a positive change. So, talk to your suppliers. If are they paying all of their staff, the living wage? What conditions are their staff working under? Ask questions, scrutinise, don't take anything for granted. Setting goals and tracking improvement. It's that age-old accountability piece that applies in all areas of business and business growth. So set those goals and track your progress. The Action Manager tool has a dashboard that can help you actually set this up and do it. So that's a really useful way to keep you on track. Or have a sustainability accountability buddy partner. Maybe that's something that could be set up in a network like this one. And then collaborate and partnership. So partnership is actually the 17th and often overlooked goal of the SDGs, but in my experience, it is the easiest to get on board with. So engage with everybody, engage with your stakeholders, with your suppliers, join up with other businesses, have a look around and see who's doing some amazing work already. You're not going to be able to go out there and tackle poverty overnight on your own, or homelessness, or some of the other, social challenges affecting us. But there might be an amazing social enterprise down the road from you, or an incredible charity who is doing fantastic work to really, move the dial on these challenging issues. Could you support them to support their work? It doesn't have to be about you finding all the solutions and the answers. And then, good message in all areas of business: learn at every step so that you can keep improving. So there are a lot of resources out there. So read up, use the tools that are out there, talk to other businesses who are doing good work, learn from them. Join networks, talk about the challenges and problems about actually moving towards these goals. I meant to look it up before I came today, but there's actually an SDG game that you can play, and there's a local facilitator here in Oxfordshire. I don't know, Pete's nodding, maybe some other people have taken part in that, and it's a really fantastic way of bringing the goals to life, lifting them off the page, and actually helping you see real practical ways of introducing them into your daily business. So I'm probably going over time, so I honestly, this is almost my last slide, I think. But just to throw some practical examples out there, I think in a breakout room in a moment, I'm going to ask all of you to think about which of those 17 goals you would like to prioritise in your business. So just pick one. And then within that goal, identify one or two actions that you can take today, this week, this month. So a few examples just to get you thinking. Goal 7, clean energy. Simple, are you using a green energy provider? Make that switch. There's no excuse not to be. Goal 8, good jobs and economic growth. Look at your employees. Are you providing parents and carers within your business with flexible working hours? Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. Rather than popping to some chain coffee shop, look at all the amazing independent businesses on your doorstep. Order your office lunch from a local producer or retailer. Look at a network such as Independent Oxfordshire to find out some of these amazing indie retailers and businesses on your doorstep. Sorry, I realise not everybody might be in Oxfordshire, so if I'm saying Oxfordshire centric, forgive me, but that's my manor, that's my patch, that's what I know. And I think it's worth saying as well, just before I finish, that you might be sitting here saying, well, I do all those things anyway. That's just common sense. That's just doing the right thing. I don't need some fancy UN SDG colourful chart to tell me what the right thing is to do. But I think the point is the SDGs can give you that framework, that roadmap, and it also can challenge you to go further and think deeper. So once you've kind of knocked off the ones that you can do something easily about, look at the ones that might be a bit more challenging. What can you do to address those? And I think increasingly important as business owners, we've got to understand that the SDGs are actually being built into policy at a government level now. And this is starting to filter down and become hardwired into the way businesses are expected to conduct themselves. So very soon, these are not going to be a nice to have, they are a need to have. And it's going to actually be really hard to operate outside of these. Look at something like the Social Value Act, for example, which has been slightly watered down recently. But that is affecting the way now that public bodies procure services. So if you're potentially a provider into public contract providers, then having social and environmental goals baked into your business is going to give you such an important competitive edge. And you can use the goals. You can download the lovely little logos, badge them on your website, in your communications. It's a great way of you being able to articulate and communicate how you as a business are behaving in a socially and environmentally responsible way. So it's a huge topic. I feel like I've only just skimmed the surface there. So that is just an introduction. But I hope if you haven't heard about the SDGs before today, that gives you a little bit of food for thought. You might go and look them up now, read some of those resources, look at those tools and platforms, and just think a little bit more about how you can incorporate them into your business strategy.